Hello and welcome everyone. So just as a thing to get things rolling, right, as my first video, I think I should start off with something that maybe some of you should not get, some of you should get, or something that is quite popular these days, but maybe you aren't too sure if you should get one or not. So I'm talking about these. I mean, this isn't a Game Boy, but it looks like one. Isn't that odd? Maybe, maybe no. But is it actually a Game Boy? So let's find out. Oh, it's actually the top camera. We start with the middle one. So essentially what these are emulation consoles. It runs a Linux based OS. What the companies actually do is they pretty much give you a host of different types of emulation, such as, like, for example, here you have Game Boy, Famicom, Super Famicom, or SNES, of course the Game Boy Color, and so on and so forth. You also have older and newer consoles, like see the Nintendo DS, Nintendo 64. Of course you have PSP and so on. So it has a lot of different consoles all baked into one platform. While these things are, they actually have a lot of companies now doing it from China, like Paukidi, Embonic, and a lot more, even Miu, and some of them run Android, some of them run this type of similar OS, Linux, but they all in the end just do one thing, which is they emulate instead of playing the actual the cartridges that you used to install. This is more like a standalone device that you have SD cards that you can put your games in it, and then you can run it. Of course, there is a gray area with these things where the preloaded games might or might not be somewhat piratey, and if you were to put your own games, you have to source it in a way that is ethical to you. But legality aside, I think that these devices are quite cool personally. The TLDR is these are actually small tiny computers running an ARM chip. They have a very decent processor, decent amount of RAM, decent amount of storage, SD card slots, and what they do is they emulate retro games on such a tiny device. Moving on to our second part, why should you care? So let's say you're the kind of guy who buys a Game Boy, and then you spend your money buying the cartridges and all. Yeah, that's good. That's a lot of fun. You have tangible things that you can hold on to, and if the Game Boy spoils, most likely you could get it repaired or maybe buy a new one, or a used one. However, if you fit in a group where maybe you're from a third world country, or maybe you grew up without an access to Game Boys and so on, this might actually fill the void of the nostalgia. Meaning, like, personally for me, I grew up not having any consoles because my parents couldn't afford it. And I remember there was this one time that my cousin brought over his Game Boy Advance SP, and this was, like, I think 20 years ago. And I was so mind blown with the form factor and the color screen, and how you can play games in such a tiny device. And this was the time where computers were huge. Your monitor was like this big, and you have your Intel Pentium processors, and also it wasn't that great. However, emulation was already a thing, because I myself remember playing Aladdin and Mario and all that using SNES emulators. And I think that over time, these companies realized that actual Game Boys are pretty much hard to come by, or maybe in a lot of countries, like even Malaysia, it's generally harder to come by compared to maybe in Japan or in the States or elsewhere, or even Singapore, where it's not as easy to come across a lot of hardware because of how the culture is and all that. So something like this does actually fill the void, and I think it's good. You don't need to buy like a lot of these, meaning there are different form factors, there are different versions of what essentially is the same thing. You don't have to get every single one of it. I think getting one is fine, and you should do it. If you look at this, it has a pretty decent screen, it has good buttons. So when you buy something, you make full use of it, you mod it, you play around with it. And I think that kind of culture is slowly dying, but this kind of great people are keeping it alive. And even the manufacturers of these are, in a way enabling those things to continue. And I think that way, if you are that kind of person, definitely get one in order to support unique tech like this. So those are the reasons why you should care. And also, in a totally different manner, tech nowadays has become rather bland, and corporations aren't taking huge risk in terms of form factors or unique devices that maybe just satisfies a niche community. And while these things are quite popular in Asia, especially like Malaysia, where you see quite a number of them being sold, it's still a relatively niche product. And while I think you can see this on TikTok and all that, where a lot of people try to push these. So I think it's great that there's a community behind this. Especially there's also a community behind hacking this. So that gives us a bit of getting back to how things how tech should be, right? Does it suck? Personally, I think it does a little. So I got this a year ago, slightly less than a year ago, and to be honest, I haven't really used it that much. I do take it, on planes or while I'm flying back and forth between Singapore and Malaysia, but I never really got a huge use out of it, and particularly because I was never a huge fan of retro games, but I was more of a fan towards the emulation itself. So growing up, I would spend time, doing like Batu Sierra and emulating on my PC and all that. But it was more fun doing it rather than playing the actual game. But that said, I spent a lot of time on Chrono Trigger. I'm almost 80%, about 80% through, and I feel that the experience that I got through playing on this was good. Meaning I had no hiccups, no issues, nothing whatsoever, and it worked well. The major points that I would say it sucks is that one, it may not be very user friendly. So if you realize that maybe if you had a Game Boy and all, I think the general consensus is that you turn it on, or you put a cartridge in, and then you play the game, then you take out and swap out with different cartridges and so on and so forth. And it only serves one purpose, which is to play Game Boy games, right? So in this case, since you have a lot of different emulation consoles, the learning curve is a bit higher. So it's not impossible. You could teach like a kid to work. I think within a day they'll get used to it. But if at first glance when you pick it up, you will see okay, maybe I'm not too familiar with what does what and how can you exit a game, or how can you access a game and all that. So it maybe I guess that is my only pain point. But even then, I think that is still a versatile piece of tech. And I think with a bit of learning, I think kids or even adults like me could easily understand and try. One simple test is, you give it to your wife or you give it to your girlfriend and you try and you ask them, can you use it? And if they can, then good. If no, then yeah, that it's not a very refined product, compared to the likes of the Switch or even an older Game Boy. Apart from that, I think it's not a huge deal breaker considering the price, right? So these things go for 300 ringgit or less than 300 ringgit. I think I bought mine for 260 something. So that's less than 100 Singaporean dollars. So it's pretty much a device where you can afford to buy it, and even if you don't use it, it's not a huge waste of money, and it makes a great gift. So if you're not happy with it, you can always just gift it to somebody else who might appreciate it more than you. And if you're just a casual gamer like me, I think keeping one of these at home is a great idea. You can connect it to to your TV using the mini HDMI here, and you could actually connect maybe a PS4 controller or any other controllers that you have, and you could play let's say Street Fighter, Mario, anything, 2 players. So me and my wife had a great time playing Bomberman, and I think if you don't have a dedicated console or you don't have something that isn't, I think this is a quick and fun way to get multiple people to play. Of course, it does take a bit of setting up. It's not very straightforward, but once you do, I think it's It's a very quick and easy way to play games. So finally, should you get one? I think at this point it's a very positive review. Whether or not you get one, yes, you should definitely just get one, and not buy the entire, like Miu and Embedings. They have like a range of devices. They come up every 6 months, so you don't have to buy everything, but you just get one. I guess just get a good one. You can check out Retro Game Core, where he talks about these things, in depth. And I think the RG35XX SP has pretty good reviews. Of course, it's a bit outdated now. And if you can get a newer model like the 4000 series from Embeding or some other company like Paukidi, Miu, then I think you are pretty much good to go. I think it's a perfect casual gamer device. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one.